Hi, I'm Tyler. I love kefir. I love to share my grains. I love to show people what I do, and I do post a lot of videos into the group and share information, just if it can be helpful. So I do kind of have a mission to get more people to drink kefir. For me, my journey started by a neighbor who I wanted a sourdough start from her, and she just said, "Oh, here's some kefir." And that was as much as she explained to me how to keep it, what to do with it. Brought it home. It had a huge separation. I didn't know what was happening. I went to YouTube University and figured out what I needed to do. And it really has improved my life. So I love kefir. But today I wanted to share some history. So that's my history of how I got my grains just accidentally. But where did my grain originate from? Or where did kefir grains come from? So I did study quite a bit. There's a fascinating history on kefir grains. There's some thoughts and theories that are out there, but a kefir grain cannot be replicated. Even science knows the lactic acid, the acetic acid, the yeast that are involved in making kefir grains, and it makes that glob, that white cauliflower looking glob of goodness that is eating the lactose out of the milk, and then the byproduct being fermented milk that is really healthy and good for us. But again, so kefir grains can't be replicated is my point. So they had to originate from somewhere. So it is said, and I have studied the Bible through my life. My parents, beat it into me, and I still study the Bible. But it is said by some that Abraham was given kefir grains from God. I don't remember specifically in the Bible a passage where it says that God gave Abraham kefir grains. Not to say that he didn't. Okay, and then Noah supposedly was given by an angel, and maybe, right? I don't know. Again, I haven't seen it specifically, the word kefir in the Bible, but neither here nor there. Where if you ask, hey, where did kefir grains come from? People know, hey, they came from the Caucasus Mountains, and that's about as much as I've seen inside the different groups that I'm a part of. But the history of it is fascinating. It should be a movie. But what ended up happening is you had this Caucasus region, and it's kind of down in an area where groups have come together. So you have people from Middle Eastern descent, like Iran. You have people from Asian countries coming into the area, and then you had people from Russian countries coming down. And there were these nomadic tribes that lived in the Caucasus Mountains, and they had animals like goats and sheep and cows, and they traveled around. And then the story is that Muhammad came down and visited them and gave them kefir grains from Allah. And even the people would reference the kefir grains as grains of the prophet, our prophets. So anyway, so Muhammad shows up and says, here's some grains. What it's going to do, these are magical grains. What it's going to do for you is it's going to allow your milk to stay longer, because they didn't have refrigeration, obviously. Uh, they were able to ferment the milk, and he showed them how it worked. He referred to them as magical grains. He then told them never to share them with the outside world. So that was something for the people of this area only. And that was the charge. So these grains then allowed them to keep their milk longer. It had huge health benefits for them, but it became sacred, religious meaning for them at some level, or at a high level. And social economically, the more grains you had, the better off you were. And then culturally, these grains became part of their everyday diet and other things like that. So this goes on, excuse me, this goes on for thousands of years. But around the 14th century, the Russians started noticing that, hey, the people in this area live longer than most. Why is that? So they would go down and they'd get served kefir. It's even said that Marco Polo traveled through the area and and had reference to a drink in that area. So he was probably served kefir as well. So they would serve it to people. So this is the beginning of the secret starting to get out, right? So they would serve it to people, but they wouldn't necessarily discuss, and they would not give grains. So later, hundreds of years later, uh, in the late 1800s, early 1900s, there's an immunologist, a Dr. Mechnikov of Russia, and he's doing studies of immune systems and how do we live longer. And what his studies focused on was gut health. So he felt that if you had a healthy gut and a good gut biome, that would benefit you long term. And he coined the phrase probiotic. And so that's Dr. Mechnikov, a real person that actually lived and studied at universities and was striving to make the world a healthier place. He won a Nobel Prize, but during this, around his time, there were outbreaks of cholera throughout the world. But in Russia specifically, there was over 1 million people that died of cholera. So he was looking at, okay, why do some people die? Why do some people live and aren't affected at all? And he came to that conclusion because he was at this point drinking sour milk, drinking kefir, and eating yogurt. And he came to the conclusion that, oh, it's gut biome. So he did a study with himself and 2 other people, and they each drank a vial of cholera. And him and another person, nothing happened to them, to him or this other person. Again, they had good gut biome, so it was all good. The other subject almost died. I don't know if doctors could do that type of study today. Maybe they do. I don't know. Probably they do behind closed doors because they have these God complexes slightly. But anyway, his conclusions were, hey, if you have healthy gut, then you will live a healthier life. He wrote a book called The Prolongation of Life. Optimistic Studies. So I bought the book. I haven't read it. It hasn't arrived yet, but I look forward to reading the book. So he wrote this book, and these doctors started reading the book and started noticing, hey, there's this kefir thing that maybe this could help our patients. So the All Russian Physicians Society wanted to get their hands on kefir specifically and kefir grains so that they could perpetuate the kefir itself. So these doctors went to a couple of brothers, the Blandoff brothers, and said, hey, will you go up and ask the people of the Caucasus Mountains for kefir grains? Because the Blandoff brothers owned the Russian dairy in Moscow, the Moscow dairy, and they had a plant in the Caucasus Mountains where, Prime's showing up here, maybe that's my book, but they they had a plant up there where they made cheese. And so the brothers went to the leaders of the tribes and asked for kefir grains and were told no. Maybe they were told, we don't know what you're talking about. Who knows? But it did not end well. So they came up with another plan. And that plan was to get their worker. They had a worker, a very attractive young 20-year-old, Irina Sakharova. Now, I'm probably butchering all these names, so please forgive me. But Irina was very beautiful. And so they asked Irina to go up and talk to this Prince Bocharov, and ask him, because she's very attractive, ask him for some grains. So she goes up. She smiles, she laughs at his jokes, she bats her eyes, she walks around. He says, wow, I want to marry this girl. And she's not up for it. So, but she is up for getting some kefir grains. So she says, hey, I don't want to marry you, but I would like some kefir grains. That would be really nice of you to give me kefir grains. And he says, no, get out. No, he didn't say get out. He just said no. She chose to leave because she said, well, I can't get the kefir grains. I'm leaving. And she leaves. Well, the prince is madly in love with Irina, and he sends a group of men after her and kidnaps her and brings her back. And he says, hey, let's get married. And she's like, well, hold on a second. Let me think about it. So she's stalling. In the meantime, she gets word to the Blandoff brothers saying, get me out of this mess. You guys sent me up here. He wants me to marry him. He kidnapped me. And so the Blandoff brothers put together a party and go and storm the castle or the tent or whatever and steal, or not steal, but free Irina from the prince Bacharov and bring her home. Well, now they have some leverage. So the prince had done something naughty. You don't get to kidnap people even back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so Irina went to the Tsar, Nicholas II, went to his court and said, hey, this is what happened. So he sends for Bacharov and he comes down and it's like, hey, you can't do that. And there needs to be restitution paid to Irina. So I'm sure the prince would have rather given her gold and jewels and whatever else to set her up financially, but she wanted kefir grains. So the prince gave her 10 pounds of kefir grains. And then the Blandoff brothers took it back to the dairy, started making kefir. I don't think it went super great at first, but by 1908, they figured it out enough that they were selling kefir, and it became the most popular drink in Russia. And I believe it is still to this day the most popular drink in Russia. So that is where these grains came from, because again, you cannot synthesize or make grains even with the correct bacteria and yeast, mixing them together and doing whatever. The grains can only come from grains. So I believe they're from divinity, and I think a lot of our whole existence. But these grains are super great. I love them. They're magical grains. I believe that. They make me happy as I drink them and make my kefir and share it with others. And that's kind of my little side hustle mission, is just to get information out to people on what kefir grains are. So this is just a little bit of history of how did we even get these grains? Well, my grains, while they came from my neighbor, originated from the Caucasus Mountains. And that is fascinating to me. So they had to make a journey somewhere along the line. And it's almost like I would love to see a history of, okay, they were here in the Caucasus Mountains with this specific tribe. They went to Russia, and then from Russia, they went out, and now they're in Idaho Falls, Idaho, and I've shipped them to people across the United States, and I continue to want to help. So in that, again, this is a long video, but hopefully you find some of this history of our grains interesting, and understand that that these things are they're just amazing. That's all I can say. Now I'm kind of pontificating without really saying much, other than hope you have a great day. Drink your kefir. I drink 2 glasses a day. I love it, and I want more people to drink it too. Thank you.